I'm going to just begin, guys, by asking, at what point did you sort of feel confident in kind of reinventing this franchise? Were there any kind of breakthroughs in the kind of process where you thought, okay, I think we've got our story?
Well, you're never confident.
Yes, confidence is something, reserved for after it works.
But I think that we felt confident to give it a try when we sort of came up with the idea of the Molly character. It really was all about that. In fact, we developed an entire script that we ended up throwing out. But the one element that was common to both was this story of a young girl who has an alien encounter as a kid and whose parents are neuralized. And so she, A, lives in a world that's lying to her, and B, spends the next 20 years trying to find the Men in Black. And that seemed like a fresh way in, a legitimate way in, and that sort of started the journey.
Was it quite sort of a challenge to make a film that feels very new and original, and very much reboots this kind of franchise, but at the same time has the kind of the essence of Men in Black, and there's enough in here for the fans of the original trilogy? Was that quite a difficult sort of balance to get right?
It is. I hope we've achieved it. I think the two things we held strong to from the original was sort of the tone, the comic tone, which has kind of cooled out, and no matter what's happening, even if the Earth might be ending in 5 minutes, your agents should never reveal any sweat. Mm-hmm. Also, we felt the first, and a lot of this had to do with Bo Welsh and Barry Sonnenfeld in the original, just created the sense of style of the movies was very strong. And while I think we invented something new with Charlie Woods in this one, our great production designer, it was all about kind of picking sort of a period and an architectural style that informed the headquarters and a lot of the style of the film. So those two elements we tried to keep the same. Tonally, we did consciously make the choice to make this more of an international thriller in its, I say thriller with very comic edge. But the originals were all based on the idea of New York cop movies. We used those for every scene. We tried to filter through that lens. And in this one, we looked at movies like Charade and North by Northwest and early Bond, and those were our references.
And when I was younger, I was a kid when I saw the first Men in Black, and I was kind of swept away by this idea that things were happening in your own kind of city. This idea that you can just, it was all, that there's this whole world sort of behind the kind of covers. Do you think that's what keeps bringing people back to this? I mean, obviously this is the fourth movie now in this franchise. What is the appeal of Men in Black? There's this kind of, what is the thing that makes people just keep returning to these films?
Well, you hit exactly on what, in fact, when we looked at the original comic book it was based on, that is the element to us that was the freshest, that we hadn't seen in a film. And it's very much reality-based sci-fi. It's about human characters. They aren't superheroes, and it all takes place in a world we can relate to. But it's that idea, and we all the time see, I feel like we all the time see things that are somewhat inexplicable, certainly in New York, and I think equally in London, or walk by someone you say, really? Is that just a human? That's what, I think that is the essential charm of the idea.
Yeah.
Do you feel?
Well, I mean, nothing that other than that, I certainly remember as a kid coming out of James Bond movies and pretending to be James Bond.
Yeah.
And there was a little trigger of that the very first time we looked at the comic book. There's an aspirational aspect of it being real world, of being able to imagine what would it be like. That's a little bit more direct than, say, some more fantasy-based franchises. Certainly what keeps us coming back.
I mean, the chemistry between the two leads is so essential. I mean, obviously, Tommy Lee Jones, of course, we've had that in Bucket. Yeah. And in this case, they've got it too. And I mean, they're already talking now of Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson, like Bodyguard reboot. I mean, it seems like these two are almost developing a kind of sort of very much a chemistry on screen. How important was that to this? And did you have to test them together, or did you just go off the fact they've been together in kind of Marvel films? Was that enough?
Well, actually, it was neither about testing nor Marvel. We cast Chris first.
Yeah.
There's very, very few actors, well, for either of them, but in Chris's case, to be a legitimate masculine leading man, but to also have sort of profound comic gifts. That's a very difficult combination. It's like that's a category of one. So you have that. Now, obviously, the rapport has to start on the stage, but it really has to be embodied into the two characters. And there's just a way the two of them work. Their physical size difference, their approach to things. You know, Chris is pretty happy-go-lucky. Tessa can be very committed to ideas. There's just a very good nature friction there, which is at the heart of one of these rapports. And the most profound statement about it I recall was Danny Elfman. There's actually the only people involved with this movie that were involved with the first three are Laurie, myself, Emma Thompson, and Danny Elfman, our composer. And when he saw a very, very early cut, I remember he said, well, the movie's great. I said, really, tell me what you think. We said, well, their rapport is fantastic. Anything else can be fixed. But that can't, and you
essential.
have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's really annoyingly funny, Chris Hemsworth.
I know, isn't he?
Because he takes his top off and you go, all right, he looks like that, that's fine. And then he's funny. It's like, come on, man, that's not fair.
What did our son Graham said when we were looking at early cuts? It said, yeah, it's unfair to look like that and be that funny?
Yeah.
He says, come on.
I think he said he's more interesting than he has a right to be.
He said he's much more interesting than he has a right to be. Yeah.
Because, I mean, thanks to sort of very much thanks to him, I mean, there's so much comic sort of potential in this movie. But I was wondering, because originally there was talk of this the sort of 22, 21 Jump Street crossover. Yes. So what sort of happened with that? Because obviously that's not part of this at all.
You know, that happened, oddly enough, interesting. We had this great idea we felt with this character of Molly, but we developed a script that didn't work. I mean, it was a very different story. It actually wasn't international yet. We didn't have that aspect of it, but it just didn't work. And we were at a moment of, we were very busy on other projects, and Lord and Miller, Chris and Phil, came to us with this insane, but we thought inspired idea. And truly, I don't think if anyone else had come to us with that idea, we would have, because it's giving away your franchise to see what they can do, but we love them and think they're so brilliant. So we said, why not? Give it a shot. So they developed a script, but it didn't. None of us felt it was quite strong enough to kind of take both franchises down that road. So once that didn't work out, we kind of decided to go back to this. With some new ideas,
It felt like such a good idea, but when you take a step back, the comedy of Men in Black always has to be played deadpan, whereas the comedy of the Jump Street movies is sort of over the top, and it didn't pan out.
But you mentioned already, obviously, this film explores the other branches in the world in Men in Black, which is something that I never really thought about when I was a kid. But if you think about it, there would be branches all over the world.
Yeah.
But does that give this franchise more scope now for more films? I guess if you've got this kind of idea that it's international, I guess you can sort of go anywhere with it now.
Yeah,
so.
But that can also be the problem. You can go anywhere with it.
Yeah, I think that you want to still, I mean, who knows? And who knows if we'll have the opportunity to make another. But it definitely gives you a place to go. It's funny, we've never, obviously the franchise could also leave the earth given what they deal with, but we've never done that. We have felt that, that it's kind of, that the earthbound quality was not limiting but actually freeing for us, because it gives you, again, it's a way to differentiate between other amazing franchise movies out there.
It's difficult because there's sort of an implied universe of Men in Black, but there aren't a bunch of secondary characters that you could spin off into movies. So in a way, you're sort of making this up every time fresh. And if we're lucky enough to be asked, the international scene could be helpful.
And it's been a sort of couple of decades in between the first movie and this. I was just wondering.
Don't remind us.
Yes.
Sorry. Just wondering.
They were good decades.
I know. Just what you guys have sort of noticed that's really changed in the industry across those times. The difference in when you first produced that film to producing this. What would you say are the most kind of palpable differences?
Well, to me, there's two come right to mind. First of all, that it is very much a global marketplace now. When we started, territories like Russia or China didn't even appear on a distribution report, and now the entire world is consuming these movies voraciously, these franchise movies. And secondly, we were strangely enough at sort of an inflection point with the first Men in Black. If you recall the movie, the creature villain at the end is the Edgar Bug. The Edgar Bug was built as a full-on articulating puppet by the brilliant Rick Baker. And over the course of the movie, CGI took over it. And in fact, we ended up replacing most of this puppet with a CG Edgar Bug. So the amount of the first movie that was actually shot captured in a camera was enormous compared to how movies are now. We're really working in a sort of a virtual environment in a way that was sort of unheard of 22 years ago.
Yeah, the makeup. I mean, the original was probably 80% makeup effects. It really was.
Or actually, the worm aliens, the little guy in the head.
Articulated.
So there's a sort of an artisanal artistry to that, which is just beautiful, and sort of those of our generation you can sort of miss a little bit.
You know, I actually, looking at it, strangely enough, I think it would be almost harder. I think it would be hard to get this made today based on obviously there's this tremendous appetite for franchises, but it tends to only be in properties that are already known commodities. And because this was a very minor comic book, there were 8 issues, it never took off at all. I think actually I think it'd be harder now in a way to make the leap. They're very, it's tougher for studios, and a lot of it's economics, but they feel much more comfortable if it has some name recognition.
And just to ask about a couple of future projects you guys are involved in. I mean, one is it Gladiator 2? Is that still happening? And if so, what's the sort of angle on that?
We're
working with Ridley.
Yes.
And that's one we wouldn't touch unless we felt we had a way to do it that's legitimate. So we're working with an amazing writer as well, Peter Craig.
It picks up the story 30 years later, so it's quite 25 years later.
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey You Guys!